They laughed when I mentioned deployment, calling me the family tourist in uniform. My father's Marine buddies joined in, their beer bottles clinking in approval while my brother smirked from his lawn chair. Mom just smiled that tight smile of hers, the one that meant keep quiet. Dear. But when the general they idolized stood, saluted, and said my call sign aloud, the backyard went silent. That was the day my parents learned what service truly meant. My name is Elena Moore, and I've learned that silence can be the loudest form of betrayal. The July heat in Savannah pressed down like a wet blanket as I stood in my parents' backyard, watching the familiar ritual unfold. Red, white, and blue bunting draped across the fence, the grill smoking with burgers, and my father holding court with his Marine buddies near the cooler. Same scene, different year, same jokes, same stories, same invisible line drawn between those who really served and me. Elena, honey, could you grab more ice from the kitchen? Mom's voice carried that particular sweetness she reserved for public gatherings. I nodded, already moving toward the house when I heard it. At least Tyler here knows what real deployment means. Dad's voice boomed, his hand clapping my brother's shoulder. Not like our Elena's desk job in the Air Force. What do they call it? Sweetheart administrative support. The laughter rippled through the crowd. I kept walking, my jaw tight, hands steady. 3 tours, 67 missions, 12 lives saved in hostile territory. But to them, I was just the daughter who typed reports. Tyler raised his beer, that smirk I'd known since childhood spreading across his face. Hey, someone's got to keep the coffee fresh on base. Right. Elena. More laughter. Ice clinked in glasses. The American flag above us barely moved in the stagnant air. Now, Tyler, Mom interjected with her mediator voice. Elena's work is important too. It's safe work. We should be grateful she's not in any real danger. Safe work. The words landed like shrapnel. My fingers found the small scar beneath my collar, the one from Kandahar that they'd never see, never ask about. The one from the night we pulled 3 Navy SEALs from a mountainside under heavy fire, my helicopter taking hits that should have sent us spiraling into the rocks below. You know, Colonel Moore, one of Dad's friends said, using his old rank like they always did. You must be proud having both kids serve, even if one's more behind the scenes. Dad's chest puffed out, that familiar parade ground posture taking over. Tyler's following the warrior tradition, infantry, just like his old man planned. Elena. He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound too dismissive. Elena found her own way to contribute. Her own way to contribute, like I was organizing bake sales instead of flying combat rescue missions at 300 feet through enemy fire. I returned with the ice, setting the bag down harder than necessary. The condensation immediately pooled on the picnic table, creating dark spots on the checkered tablecloth Mom had ironed that morning. There she is, Tyler announced, already 2 beers past subtle. The Air Force's finest paper pusher. Tell them about your last deployment. Elena. What was it? Updating filing systems. I looked at him, really looked at him. 28 years old, private security contractor. Never seen actual combat but wore his tactical gear to grocery stores. Then I looked at my father, his gray hair still in that high and tight cut, his faded eagle globe, and anchor tattoo visible beneath his polo shirt sleeve. The man who'd raised me on stories of honor and service, who'd taught me to tie knots and read maps before I could ride a bike. The same man who'd somehow decided my service didn't measure up to his legacy. Something like that, I said quietly. The conversation shifted, as it always did, to Dad's glory days. Fallujah, Desert Storm, names and places that had become mythology in this backyard. Tyler hung on every word, adding his own embellishments about understanding the warrior mindset from his 6 months of stateside training. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn, the fireworks started in the distance. Early celebrations from the neighbors, Little pops and whistles that made my shoulders tense involuntarily. Nobody noticed. They never did. Mom started gathering plates, humming something patriotic and off-key. Dad's friends began their goodbyes, each one shaking Tyler's hand with respect, patting my shoulder with condescension. "Keep your brother out of trouble," one said, like I was still 12 years old bringing Tyler Band-Aids after his bike accidents. When the last guest left, I stood alone by the fence, watching the fireworks bloom against the darkening sky. Each explosion reflected in my eyes, reminding me of different nights, different skies, when those lights meant incoming fire and lives hanging by spider silk threads. Under my breath, barely audible above the distant celebrations, I made a promise. Next time they laugh, I'll remind them who taught me to stay silent. The night air carried the smell of gunpowder and grilled meat, America celebrating itself while I stood invisible in my own family's yard, wearing my service like a secret they'd chosen to bury. The rotor blades cut through the Afghan night at 2:43 a.m., their rhythm matching my heartbeat as we descended into hell. That was 18 months ago, but in my dreams, I'm still there, gripping the cyclic stick while Staff Sergeant Rodriguez called out enemy positions from the gunner's seat. Camp Delmore had been my home for 3 years, a dusty sprawl of tents and reinforced bunkers where the 58th Rescue Squadron operated far from CNN cameras and hometown parades. We were Pedro's combat rescue pilots who went where others couldn't or wouldn't. Our missions didn't make headlines. The families we saved rarely knew our names. That's how it was supposed to be. Ghostwriter, this is Pedro 6-4. I'd said into the radio that night, my voice steady despite the tracers lighting up the mountainside like deadly fireflies. We have visual on Reaper team. Beginning approach. The SEAL team had been pinned down for 6 hours, 2 wounded, ammunition running low. The first rescue attempt had been aborted when an RPG took out the tail rotor of a Black Hawk. We were their last chance before sunrise would expose them completely. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the intercom. "More, we got movement on the ridge. 3 o'clock. I banked hard left, the helicopter groaning under the stress. My co-pilot, Lieutenant Jim Kowalski, was calling out altitude readings while our flight medic, Captain Sarah Dunn, prepped the wounded for immediate extraction. The whole dance took 11 minutes. 11 minutes that felt like 11 hours, with bullets pinging off our armor plating and the fuel gauge dropping toward empty. "We don't do it for medals," Colonel Harrison had told me after that mission, standing in his office while I filed my report. "We do it so others can go home." I'd nodded, understanding the weight of it. The SEAL team leader had gripped my hand afterward, his eyes red with exhaustion and something else gratitude mixed with disbelief. "You're insane for flying into that," he'd said, "but thank God you did." Now, sitting in my childhood bedroom in Savannah, those memories felt like they belonged to someone else. The commendations were locked in a safe. The photos from base were stored in unmarked folders. My flight suit hung in the back of the closet, behind old prom dresses Mom refused to donate. The house was quiet at 5:15 a.m. when I made coffee, a habit from base where pre-dawn briefings were standard. Through the kitchen window, I could see Dad's flag already raised, pristine and perfectly lit. He'd installed the lighting system after retirement, part of his shrine to service that somehow never included space for mine. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through encrypted messages from my unit. Martinez had sent another joke about civilian life. Kowalski was struggling with his own transition, his wife not understanding why he couldn't talk about where he'd been. Dunn was at Walter Reed, working with wounded warriors who'd probably never know she'd been the one keeping them alive at 15,000 feet. "You're up early." Mom appeared in the doorway, her robe tied tight, hair still in curlers. "Old habits," I said, not looking up from my phone. She poured herself coffee, adding 3 sugars like always. "Your father means well, you know. He worries about you. All that time overseas, and you never talk about it." "Nothing to talk about." I lied. The word's automatic. "Tyler says his company might have an opening in their administrative division. Better pay than the military. and you'd be safe. Safe. That word again. Like safety was the highest aspiration for my life. I'm good, Mom. She sighed. That disappointed sound I'd heard since high school when I'd chosen ROTC over cheerleading. We just want what's best for you, honey. Your father knows how dangerous military service can be. He doesn't want you getting hurt trying to prove something. Trying to prove something. As if every mission, every life saved, was just me playing dress-up in Daddy's world. I thought about the young Marine we'd extracted from an IED blast, both legs gone, screaming for his mother while Dunn worked to keep him stable. I'd held that helicopter steady in a sandstorm so thick I couldn't see beyond the windshield, flying by instruments and instinct alone. He'd lived. He'd gone home. His parents sent a Christmas card to the squadron, not knowing individual names but thanking the angels who'd saved their son. I need to go for a run, I said, standing abruptly. Outside, the Savannah morning was already humid, the air thick with the promise of another scorching day. I ran past perfect lawns and American flags, past yellow ribbons tied around oak trees, past "Support Our Troops" bumper stickers on SUVs that had never seen anything more dangerous than a grocery store parking lot. My feet found their rhythm, the same pace I'd used to run the perimeter at Camp Delmore, always alert, always ready. In my earbuds, I played the same playlist from deployment rock music loud enough to drown out everything except the mission. But here, there was no mission. Just the suffocating weight of being invisible in a family that claimed to worship service while refusing to see mine. The country club's dining room smelled of old leather and bourbon, the kind of place where military traditions were preserved in oil paintings and dusty display cases. Dad had insisted on Sunday brunch, his monthly ritual of showing off Tyler to his retired officer friends. I'd been commanded to attend his word, not mine. Tyler held court at our table, describing his tactical consulting work with animated hand gestures, using terms he'd learned from YouTube videos. Dad nodded along, pride radiating from every pore. Mom picked at her eggs Benedict, occasionally murmuring approval. The Moore legacy continues, Colonel Reynolds said, raising his mimosa toward Tyler. Your father must be thrilled to have a son following in his footsteps. I buttered my toast methodically, each stroke of the knife precise and controlled. Both my children serve, Dad corrected, though his tone suggested an asterisk attached to my inclusion. Tyler here understands the real burden of leadership, frontline mentality. Speaking of service, a gravelly voice interrupted. Major Neil Hawkins approached our table, his cane tapping against the marble floor. He was older than Dad, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, one of the few here who'd seen combat beyond the safety of command posts. Dad straightened, immediately deferential. Neil, good to see you. You remember my son Tyler and my daughter Elena? Hawkins nodded at Tyler absently, but his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that made my spine straighten. Elena Moore, he said slowly, like he was tasting the name. Captain Elena Moore. Yes, sir. His eyes narrowed, studying my face. You were on Operation Iron Sky, weren't you? The table went silent. Dad's coffee cup halted midway to his lips. Tyler's story about tactical superiority died in his throat. I'm not at liberty to discuss operational details, sir, I replied. The standard response drilled into anyone who'd worked classified missions. Hawkins leaned on his cane, a knowing smile playing at his lips. No, I suppose you're not. But I was at MacDill when the after-action reports came through. 12 hours of continuous operations, 3 downed aircraft, 1 pilot who kept flying despite taking shrapnel to the shoulder. My left shoulder twitched involuntarily. Mom gasped softly. Dad's face had gone pale. You must be mistaken, Dad said, his voice strained. Elena works in administrative. Hawkins barked a laugh. Is that what she told you, or what you told yourself? He turned back to me. Pedro 6'4", Wright heard you flew that bird with half your hydraulics shot out and still managed to extract the entire SEAL team. Tyler's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Mom's hand covered her heart. Dad looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. "Just doing my job, sir," I said quietly. "Hell of a job," Hawkins replied. He looked at my father with something between pity and disgust. "Henry, you've got a genuine hero for a daughter. Though I suspect you already knew that, didn't you? The classification on Iron Sky wasn't that tight. Not for someone of your clearance level." Dad's jaw worked silently. I watched him, seeing the exact moment he realized I knew that he'd seen the reports, knew that he'd chosen to bury them. "Why?" The word escaped before I could stop it. Dad set down his coffee cup carefully, his hands steady in that practiced way of career military men who'd learned to never show weakness. "It was for your protection," he said, not meeting my eyes. "The publicity, the attention it would have made you a target." "A target," I repeated flatly. "Or a threat." Tyler found his voice. "Wait, you actually flew combat missions, real ones." I turned to my brother, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. The tactical vest he wore to civilian gyms, the combat boots that had never seen dust heavier than a golf course sand trap, the stories borrowed from video games and military forums. 67 of them, I said. "But who's counting?" "The families you saved are counting," Hawkins interjected. He pulled out his phone, showing a photo. "My grandson, Marine Corporal, Kandahar, 2 years ago. IED took out his convoy. A pilot named Moore flew through a sandstorm to get him out." He looked at my father. "I've been wanting to thank her properly ever since I made the connection. Imagine my surprise finding out she was Henry Moore's daughter. The same Henry Moore who keeps bragging about his son's warrior spirit while his daughter pretends to push papers. Mom's eggs." Benedict sat forgotten, congealing on the china plate. The dining room's ambient chatter seemed to fade to a distant hum. Other tables were starting to notice our corner, the tension radiating outward like ripples on water. "We should go," Dad said, standing abruptly. "Sit down, Henry," Hawkins commanded, and Dad, Colonel Henry Moore, who'd never taken orders from anyone in retirement, sat. "Your daughter flew into places that would make grown men soil themselves. She did it without fanfare, without glory, without even her own family's recognition. And you knew, and you chose to keep it buried because what? Because it didn't fit your narrative of what service looks like." "You don't understand," Dad started, but Hawkins cut him off with a raised hand. "I understand perfectly. You built your identity on being the warrior patriarch. Can't have your daughter outshining that legacy. Can you? Especially not by actually saving lives instead of just talking about it at country club brunches." He turned to me one last time. "Captain Moore, it was an honor." He saluted, crisp and precise, right there in the middle of the dining room. I returned it instinctively, my body remembering the motion even as my mind reeled. Hawkins walked away, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. The silence he left behind was deafening. The documents were hidden in Dad's study, locked in the bottom drawer of his desk beneath old deployment photos and Marine Corps memorabilia. I found them at 3:17 unable to sleep after the country club confrontation, picking the lock with skills he'd taught me when I was 12. "Every Marine should know basic fieldcraft," he'd said then, proud of his daughter's quick learning. Now those same skills revealed his betrayal. The folder was marked "Classified Operation Iron Sky" with my service number beneath. Inside, every detail of that night laid out in military precision. The commendation recommendation from General Huxley himself, the witness statements from the SEAL team, the medical report detailing my shoulder injury that I'd hidden from my family for 2 years, and at the bottom, a memorandum dated 3 weeks after the mission, with Dad's signature authorizing the reclassification to a higher level to protect operational security and personnel involved. Operational security. The words burned. I photocopied everything, hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. Then I found more. Emails between Dad and his contacts at the Pentagon. "Elena doesn't need the spotlight. One read, "Better to keep her safe from media attention. You know how these things can spiral. Safe. Always that word, wielded like a weapon to keep me small." The next morning, I confronted Mom in the kitchen while Dad was at his morning golf game. I spread the papers across her pristine granite countertop, watching her face cycle through confusion, recognition, and finally, a horrible understanding. "He knew," she whispered, sinking into a chair. "All those times he let Tyler mock you, let his friends dismiss you. He knew." "He didn't just know," I said. "He made sure nobody else would. He buried it." Her hands shook as she picked up the commendation. "Extraordinary heroism under enemy fire. Saved 12 personnel. Sustained injury while maintaining aircraft control." She looked up at me, tears streaming. "Your shoulder. That scar you said was from training. Shrapnel. From an RPG that barely missed the cockpit. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me, or would you have taken Dad's side, insisted I was being dramatic, that I should be grateful he was protecting me?" She flinched at the accuracy of it. We both knew that's exactly what would have happened. Tyler arrived an hour later, summoned by Mom's cryptic text. He read through the documents in silence, his perpetual swagger evaporating with each page. When he finished, he looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "You flew into a hot zone with a damaged aircraft and pulled out an entire SEAL team," he said flatly. "Yes." "While taking enemy fire?" "Yes." "And Dad knew. This whole time, he knew." "Yes." He slumped against the counter, his tactical vest looking suddenly ridiculous in Mom's pastel kitchen. "Jesus, Elena, I've been such an ass." "You've been exactly what he wanted you to be," I said. His echo, his validation that real service looks like him, not like me. Dad arrived home at 11:45, golf shoes clicking on the tile floor, calling out his usual greeting. He stopped short when he saw us arranged around the kitchen like a tribunal, the documents displayed between us. "Where did you get his command voice, the one that used to make us snap to attention as kids?" "Does it matter?" I asked. "The question is why you buried them." He straightened, falling back on military bearing when cornered. "Those documents are classified. You had no right." "I had every right." The words exploded out of me. "Those are my missions, my blood, my service that you decided wasn't worth acknowledging. I was protecting you. From what recognition respect? From threatening your precious legacy." "You don't understand the burden of that kind of attention," he said, his voice dropping to that paternal tone he used when he thought he knew better. "The media would have been all over you. Every feminist group, every political organization wanting to use you as a poster child. Is that what you wanted?" "What I wanted," I said slowly, each word precise, "was my father to be proud of me. To not have to sit at Sunday dinners listening to you praise Tyler's 6 months of stateside training while pretending I spent 3 years filing paperwork. Tyler's following the warrior tradition. Tyler's never seen combat." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Tyler didn't even protest, just stared at his boots. "And you have," Dad shot back. "You think flying a helicopter makes you a warrior?" I laughed, bitter and sharp. "No, Dad. Flying a helicopter doesn't make me a warrior. Flying one through enemy fire with half my hydraulics gone, a shoulder full of shrapnel, and 12 lives depending on me staying conscious that might qualify. But what do I know? I'm just the family tourist in uniform." Mom stood, placing herself between us. "Henry, how could you—" "Your own daughter. I did what I thought was best," he said, but the conviction was leaking out of his voice. "You did what was best for you," I corrected. Because acknowledging my service meant admitting that your version of what a warrior looks like might be wrong, that your daughter might have exceeded your legacy instead of just living in its shadow. I gathered the documents, leaving one copy on the counter. "Keep these. Frame them next to Tyler's participation certificates if you want, or burn them. I don't care anymore." "Where are you going?" Mom asked. "Back to base." back to where my service actually matters to someone. As I reached the door, Dad called out, "Elena, wait!" I paused but didn't turn around. "The Veterans Honor Gala is next month," he said quietly. "General Huxley will be there. He specifically asked about you." "Then I guess you'll have to explain why your administrative support daughter isn't interested in attending." I left them there in the kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my father's calculated betrayal, the silence as heavy as the July heat outside. 3 years passed before I walked into that ballroom again. 3 years of deployments, promotions, and a comfortable distance from Savannah. I'd made captain, then major, earned 2 more commendations that Dad would never frame. The Veterans Honor Gala invitation had come through official channels this time, not family ones. Major Elena Moore, specifically requested by General Robert Huxley himself. The Marriott ballroom glittered with forced elegance, red, white, and blue bunting, tables numbered with military unit patches, old men in dress uniforms that strained at the seams. I wore my dress blues, every ribbon precisely placed, the silver star prominent among them. No more hiding. "Elena." Mom's voice, hesitant behind me. She looked older, grayer. Dad stood beside her in his dress uniform, the one he hauled out for every military occasion. Tyler was there too, subdued in a plain suit, his tactical phase apparently over. "Major Moore," I corrected, not unkindly, but firmly. Dad's jaw tightened at the emphasis on my rank. I outranked him now. We both knew it. "You look." Mom started, then stopped, taking in the ribbons, the insignia, the unmistakable evidence of what I'd become without their recognition. "You look like a soldier." "I've always looked like a soldier. You just weren't looking." Before Dad could respond, the crowd shifted, and General Robert Huxley entered the room. He was everything military bearing should be, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, commanding presence that made full colonels straighten their spines. Dad had idolized him for 20 years, quoted his autobiography at dinner tables, framed a photo of them together from Desert Storm. "There's my table," Dad said quickly, eager to escape. "The general will want to catch up about the old days." But Huxley's scan of the room stopped on me. His face broke into something I'd rarely seen in senior officers' genuine warmth. "Major Moore," he called out, his voice carrying across the ballroom. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. He walked directly to me, bypassing 3 senators and a Pentagon deputy secretary. Dad stepped forward, hand extended, that practiced smile ready. "General Huxley, it's an honor." Huxley walked past him without acknowledgement, stopping directly in front of me. "Major Moore," he repeated, quieter now. "I've been hoping to meet you properly for years." "Sir," I replied, maintaining military bearing despite the surreal moment. "At ease." "Major?" He smiled. "Though I suspect you haven't been at ease since you walked in here." The crowd had formed a subtle circle around us, Dad and his Marine buddies included. I could feel their confusion, their discomfort at the scene not matching their expectations. "I understand you're the one who flew Iron Sky," Huxley said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Just doing my job, sir." "Your job." He shook his head. "Colonel Harrison sent me your full record last month. 67 combat rescue missions, 418 personnel extracted, one of the highest mission success rates in Pedro history." He paused, letting the numbers sink into the listening crowd. "And you call it just doing your job?" Dad's face had gone from pale to red. Tyler looked like he might be sick. Mom gripped her clutch purse like a lifeline. "I believe you know my father," I said, gesturing to Dad. "Colonel Henry Moore, retired." Huxley's expression shifted, something cold entering his eyes. "Yes, I know Henry. We've served together." He looked at Dad directly. "Though I admit I'm surprised to learn Major Moore is your daughter. In all our conversations about family and service, you never mentioned having a daughter in combat rescue." "Elena's service has always been classified," Dad managed. "Classified," Huxley repeated, The word sharp as a blade. Interesting term for it. I'd have called it hidden. Buried? Dismissed. The ballroom had gone quiet enough to hear the air conditioning hum. Someone dropped a fork at a distant table, the clatter explosive in the silence. Sir, one of Dad's friends ventured. Surely Colonel Moore was just protecting what exactly? Huxley turned on him. His daughter's modesty or his own narrative. He looked back at me. Major Moore, that night over Kandahar, when you held that aircraft steady despite hydraulic failure and enemy fire, who were you protecting then? The team, sir, the SEALs who needed extraction. And when you refused medical evacuation to fly 2 more missions that night, the crowd gasped. Dad's mouth opened, but no sound came out. People needed help, sir. My shoulder could wait. Huxley nodded slowly, then did something that stopped every heart in that ballroom. He came to attention and saluted. Not the casual salute of a superior acknowledging a subordinate, but the crisp, precise salute of respect between warriors. Captain Moore, my apologies. Major Moore, it is an honor to finally meet the pilot of Pedro 6-4. I returned the salute, my eyes never leaving his. When we both dropped our hands, the ballroom remained frozen, Dad's world rearranging itself in that silence. Walk with me, Major, Huxley said, offering his arm. I'd like to introduce you to some people who've been eager to meet the real hero of Iron Sky. As we walked away, I heard Tyler's voice, weak and wondering. Dad, why didn't you tell us? And Dad's response, barely audible. I thought I was, but I didn't hear the rest. I was already moving forward, walking beside the general my father had worshipped, while my parents stood in our wake, finally seeing what they'd chosen to ignore. The Savannah Morning News ran the story above the fold. Local pilot receives Silver Star for heroic rescue mission. The photo showed me with General Huxley at the gala, his hand on my shoulder, both of us in dress uniform. The article detailed Operation Iron Sky, the 67 missions, the lives saved. Reporter Michelle Watts had done her homework, interviewing 3 of the SEALs I'd extracted, the Marine whose grandfather had been Major Hawkins, even Colonel Harrison from my unit. By 7:30 a.m., our neighborhood was buzzing. Mrs. Patterson from next door knocked, newspaper in hand, asking Mom if this was really little Elena. The phone rang constantly. Dad's Marine buddies, Mom's church friends, Tyler's co-workers, everyone wanting to know how they'd missed this story for 3 years. I watched from the kitchen window as Dad retrieved the paper from the driveway, his shoulders rigid. He stood there in his bathrobe, reading it 3 times before coming inside. They quoted General Huxley, he said unnecessarily, setting the paper on the counter. Major Moore represents the finest traditions of military service courage, dedication, and humility. The fact that she served with such distinction while seeking no recognition makes her actions all the more admirable. Good quote, I said, sipping my coffee. Tyler arrived an hour later with a box of donuts, his peace offering of choice since childhood. The guys at work are losing their minds, he said. They want to know if you could come speak to our tactical response team. Your tactical response team that does corporate security. He had the grace to look embarrassed. Yeah, those guys. The doorbell rang again. Mom answered it, her voice carrying to the kitchen. Oh, Judge Morrison. Yes, it's true. Elena's here if you'd like to. Elena. Not home. I called back, but the afternoon brought a visitor I couldn't avoid. General Huxley himself, standing on our front porch in civilian clothes but still radiating command presence. Major Moore, he said when I opened the door. Mind if I come in? Dad practically materialized in the foyer, that star-struck expression returning. General Huxley. What an honor. Please, come in. Can I get you coffee, beer? Coffee would be fine. Henry. His tone was polite, but cool. I actually came to speak with your daughter. We sat in the living room, the same space where Dad's service photos covered one wall, his boot camp graduation, his deployment photos, his promotion ceremonies. Not a single photo of me in uniform. I wanted to apologize, Huxley began, surprising everyone. I should have pushed harder 3 years ago when I learned about the reclassification. I knew something was off when Iron Sky's reports got buried, but I didn't pursue it. It wasn't your responsibility, sir, I said. Perhaps not officially, but I knew your father. I should have guessed. He looked at Dad. Henry and I served together multiple times. He's a good Marine, but he's always been particular about his legacy. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Mom twisted her wedding ring. The reason I'm here, Huxley continued, is that next week there's a ceremony at MacDill. We're recognizing several service members for classified operations that can now be acknowledged. Iron Sky is being declassified fully. The families of those SEALs want to thank you publicly. That's not necessary. It is, he interrupted. Major, you've hidden in your father's shadow long enough. Time to step into the light. The doorbell rang again. Through the window, I could see a local news van pulling up. That'll be about the ceremony announcement, Huxley said. It went live an hour ago. Tyler answered the door this time, and I heard reporter voices. We're looking for Major Elena Moore. Is she available for comment? The quiet life is over, I'm afraid, Huxley said, not looking sorry at all. He stood, then paused. Your father told me something once. Henry, you said the hardest part of being a Marine was knowing your children might never understand the weight of service. He looked between Dad and me. Turns out your daughter understood it better than anyone. She just had the grace not to weaponize it at Sunday dinners. After he left, the house felt smaller somehow. The news crew set up on the lawn despite Tyler's attempts to wave them off. The phone rang continuously. Mom fielded calls with increasing exhaustion. Dad retreated to his study. Door closed, probably staring at the wall of his own accomplishments that suddenly seemed diminished. That evening, we attempted dinner like a normal family. The TV was on in the background, local news at 6, when my face appeared on screen. A remarkable story of hidden heroism, the anchor said. Major Elena Moore, daughter of Colonel Henry Moore, has been revealed as one of the most decorated rescue pilots in recent military history. They interviewed General Huxley, who repeated his praise. They showed footage from the gala, that moment when he'd saluted me while Dad stood frozen in the background. Then they interviewed someone unexpected, Lieutenant Kowalski, my co-pilot from Iron Sky. Major Moore saved my life that night, he said simply. When I got hit by shrapnel, she flew one-handed while applying pressure to my wound. She could have aborted the mission. No one would have blamed her. Instead, she completed the extraction and then flew me to medical, all while wounded herself. That's who she is. The report ended with a note about the upcoming ceremony. The public is invited to attend this long-overdue recognition. Dad set down his fork. I suppose you're happy now, getting your moment in the spotlight. No, Dad, I said quietly. I'm not happy. I'm vindicated. There's a difference. He stood to leave, but stopped at the doorway. I still think I was protecting you. From what? I asked. From being seen, from being valued, from threatening your narrative of what a warrior looks like. He didn't answer, just walked to his study and closed the door. Mom started clearing plates. Tyler helped without being asked. And I sat there, watching my story play out on the television, finally visible after years of being erased by the very person who should have been my biggest advocate. The knock came at 10:15 p.m., soft but insistent. I found Dad standing in the hallway outside my childhood bedroom, looking older than his 62 years. His usual military bearing had crumbled into something raw and uncertain. Can we talk? He asked. The command voice replaced by something I'd never heard from him, vulnerability. I let him in. He sat on the edge of my desk chair while I remained standing, arms crossed. The room still held remnants of my younger self academic trophies. ROTC certificates, a faded poster of an Apache helicopter I'd hung when I was 16. I've been in my study all evening, he began, then stopped, running his hand over his face. Reading the full report. The real one. not the sanitized version I pushed through. I waited. I'd learned patience in cockpits over hostile territory. I could wait now. You flew for 11 hours straight with a damaged aircraft and a wounded co-pilot, he continued, his voice thick. The fuel calculations. Christ, Elena, you were running on fumes. The margin of error was nothing. Someone had to fly, I said simply. He looked up at me then, and for the first time in my life, I saw tears in my father's eyes. When I was in Fallujah, I lost 3 men because air support couldn't reach us in time. Weather, enemy fire, command decisions doesn't matter why. They died waiting for help that never came. He paused, struggling with words. You were the help that came, for someone else's squad, someone else's sons. It was my job. Stop. The word came out sharp, desperate. Stop minimizing it. That's what I did. That's what I've been doing for 3 years. He stood, pacing to the window. You want to know the truth? The real reason I buried it, I said nothing, but my silence was answer enough. I was terrified, he admitted. When I read that first report, saw what you'd actually been doing over there, flying into hell over and over, refusing medical evacuation, pushing damaged aircraft beyond their limits, I was terrified, and he turned to face me. I was ashamed. Ashamed of me. Of myself. The words fell between us like a confession. I spent my entire career building this image of the warrior Marine, the combat veteran, the tough father raising tough kids. And then my daughter, my quiet, studious daughter who I'd patronized for choosing Air Force over Marines, turned out to be braver than I ever was. The room felt airless. Outside, I could hear the distant hum of traffic on Interstate 95, the world continuing while ours stood still. I told myself I was protecting you, he continued, from media attention, from becoming a political symbol, from whatever. But I was protecting myself, from having to admit that my son, who I'd pushed toward combat roles, was playing soldier while my daughter was living it, from having to face my Marine buddies knowing my daughter had seen more action than half of them combined, from having to reconfigure everything I thought I knew about strength and service and courage. So you erased me instead. I erased you. He sat back down, suddenly looking every year of his age. Every Sunday dinner when Tyler talked about his training, every barbecue when my friends dismissed your service, every time I let you be invisible, I was erasing you, and you just took it, with more grace than I deserved. What did you expect me to do, beg for your approval? Wave my medals around like Tyler waves his tactical gear. I expected you to fight back. I was too busy fighting actual enemies. He flinched at that, the truth of it undeniable. I don't need your approval anymore. Dad, I said, sitting on my bed across from him. I haven't for a long time. But what hurts, what really cuts deep, is that you had it. You had the proof of my service, and you chose to hide it. You let me sit at your table like a fraud while you knew the truth. I know. His voice broke. Elena, I know. And I can't undo it. I can't take back 3 years of dismissal and mockery and invisibility. I can't pretend I didn't fail you as a father and as a fellow service member. No, I agreed. You can't. We sat in silence for a long moment. Through the window, I could see the flagpole in the backyard, lit up as always, the flag moving gently in the night breeze. General Huxley called me a coward today, Dad said suddenly. After he left here, he called me, said I was a coward for hiding behind protocol and classification when my real job was to be your father, to be proud of you, to stand up for you. He wasn't wrong. No, Dad agreed. He wasn't. He stood slowly, looking around my room as if seeing it for the first time. That ceremony next week. I'd like to be there, if you'll allow it. Not as Colonel Moore, not as the Marine veteran, just as your father, finally doing what I should have done 3 years ago. And what's that? He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. Standing in your shadow for once, learning what real courage looks like. He met my eyes. "It looks like you. Elena, it's always looked like you." I was just too proud and too scared to see it. After he left, I sat in the darkness of my childhood room, processing words I'd never expected to hear. Outside, the flag continued its quiet dance in the night wind, a witness to all the battles fought in this house, the silent ones that left scars no one could see. My phone buzzed, a text from General Huxley. "Sometimes the hardest battles are fought at home. Proud of you, Major." I looked at the doorway where Dad had stood, broken and honest for perhaps the first time in our relationship. The war wasn't over. Trust would take time, if it came at all. But for the first time in 3 years, we'd stopped pretending there wasn't a battlefield between us. That was something. Maybe it was even enough to build on. The sun broke through morning clouds at MacDill Air Force Base, casting long shadows across the tarmac where 300 people had gathered. The ceremony platform stood draped in flags, a podium waiting for words that were 3 years overdue. I stood at attention in my dress blues, the silver star already on my chest, about to receive public recognition for what had been hidden in classified files and family silence. The crowd was larger than expected. The SEAL team had come, all 12 of them, alive because of that night over Kandahar. Their families, too, holding small American flags and photographs. My squadron formed an honor guard. Local media lined the barriers with cameras ready. And there, in the 3rd row, sat my family. Mom wore the blue dress she saved for special occasions, tissues already clutched in her hand. Tyler stood straight, no tactical gear, just a respectful suit. And Dad, Colonel Henry Moore, retired, sat in his dress uniform, wearing every medal he'd earned. General Huxley took the podium, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "We're here today to correct an oversight, to bring into the light what should never have been hidden, to honor a warrior whose courage was buried by bureaucracy and, frankly, by those who should have celebrated it most." I felt Dad flinch from 20 feet away. "Major Elena Moore," Huxley continued, "flew 67 combat rescue missions, saved 418 lives, and did so while asking for no recognition, no glory, no spotlight. She represents the quiet professionals who do impossible things in impossible circumstances, then come home and sit silently while others tell war stories." He called me forward. As I walked to the podium, the SEAL team stood as one, saluting. Their families followed, then my squadron, then, spreading through the crowd like a wave, everyone rose to their feet, everyone except Dad, for a heartbeat. He remained seated, looking up at me on that platform. I could see the war in his face, pride battling with shame, love fighting through years of deliberate blindness. Then, slowly, as if carrying the weight of 3 years' worth of missed opportunities, Colonel Henry Moore stood. He didn't just stand. He came to attention with the precision that had defined his 30-year career. And then, in front of everyone who'd heard him minimize my service, in front of the Marines who'd laughed at his jokes about his desk job daughter, in front of Tyler who'd believed the fiction, he rendered a salute. Not the casual salute of a superior to a subordinate, not the obligatory gesture of military courtesy. This was the salute of recognition, sharp, sustained, and laden with everything he'd never said. Time seemed to pause. The morning wind stilled. Even the jets on the flight line seemed to quiet their engines. I held his gaze across that distance, seeing him truly see me for the first time. Then I returned the salute, crisp and clean. When our hands dropped, something shifted. The invisible wall between us, built brick by brick with every dismissed deployment and buried commendation, began to crack. General Huxley cleared his throat, drawing attention back to the podium. Major Moore exemplifies something we sometimes forget in our rush to celebrate the loud and visible. True courage often whispers. True service doesn't announce itself. It just shows up, does the job, and goes home to fight different battles sometimes against the very people who should understand it best. He presented the public commendation, reading citations that made Mom cry and Tyler shake his head in amazement. When he finished, he stepped back and did something unscripted. "Colonel Moore," he called out. "Would you like to say something?" The crowd turned. Dad stood frozen for a moment, then walked forward with measured steps. He climbed the platform and approached the microphone. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted it. "I'm here today as a father who failed," he began, his voice carrying the weight of his confession. "I let pride and fear blind me to what real courage looked like. I buried my daughter's heroism because it threatened my narrow definition of service. I chose my ego over her honor." He turned to me. "Elena, you asked me once what I was protecting you from. The answer is simple. I was protecting you from outshining me. And that's the most shameful thing a father can admit." His voice cracked, but he continued. "You flew into hell while I told people you pushed papers. You saved lives while I let you be invisible at my own table. You embodied everything I claimed to value while I dismissed you for not looking like me." He stepped closer, and for the first time in my adult life, my father pulled me into an embrace. Not the stiff, one-armed gesture of family photos, but a real embrace, his shoulders shaking slightly. "I'm proud of you," he whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "I've always been proud of you. I was just too much of a coward to show it." When we separated, his eyes were wet, mine were too. The crowd erupted in applause. The SEALs cheered. Mom was openly sobbing. Tyler whistled through his fingers. And somewhere in that noise, in that moment of recognition 3 years delayed, I felt something release in my chest, not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the possibility of it. As the ceremony concluded and people began to disperse, Dad stood beside me on the platform, no longer the towering figure of my childhood, but a man who'd finally learned to look up to his daughter. A young Air Force cadet approached, nervous but determined. "Major Moore," she said, "I'm shipping out next month. Rescue squadron. Any advice?" Before I could answer, Dad spoke. "Listen to Major Moore," he said firmly. "She knows what real service looks like." The cadet nodded and turned to me expectantly. Behind her, others were gathering young service members, veterans, families, all wanting to hear from the pilot who'd been hidden but refused to disappear. As I began to speak, sharing the lessons learned in cockpits over hostile territory and in backyards over hostile silence, I caught Dad's eye. He stood at attention again, not saluting this time, just standing witness to his daughter finally taking her place in the light. The flag snapped in the wind above us, and for the first time in 3 years, we were all facing the same direction. Thank you for listening to Elena's story of hidden valor and hard-earned recognition. Where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below and let's connect across the miles. If this story of family, service, and the courage to be seen resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Your own stories of overcoming invisibility and finding your voice matter too. Let's hear them.